She worked faithfully for the same company for 25 years. Today, she sleeps in her car with a cardboard sign. 11 months later, she's a millionaire teaching others her controversial method. Rebecca Martinez had never imagined that loyalty could become her greatest weakness. For 25 years, she walked through the same office doors, sat at the same desk, and believed that dedication would protect her future. She wasn't naive about corporate life, but she had built her entire identity around being the reliable one, the employee who never missed a deadline, never complained about overtime, and never questioned the system that kept her comfortable but never wealthy. The morning of March 15th started like any other. Rebecca arrived at the accounting firm where she had worked since she was 22 years old. She had her coffee ready, her reports organized, and her mind focused on the quarterly review that would determine bonuses for the year. She had always been good with numbers, not just calculating them, but understanding what they meant for people's lives. Every spreadsheet she created represented someone's mortgage payment, someone's child's college fund, someone's retirement dream. But that morning, the numbers that mattered most were the ones she couldn't see coming. The company had been quietly restructuring for months, outsourcing entire departments to overseas contractors who could do the same work for a fraction of the cost. Rebecca's department wasn't just being reduced, it was being eliminated entirely. 25 years of institutional knowledge, of relationships with clients, of understanding the intricate details that made the business run smoothly. All of it was being replaced by software and remote workers who would never know her name. The meeting was brief and brutal in its efficiency. Human resources had turned termination into a science, complete with prepared statements about market conditions and strategic realignment. Rebecca sat in that sterile conference room, listening to words that felt like they were being spoken in a foreign language. Severance package, transition period, COBRA benefits. Each phrase landed like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure because that's what 25 years of professionalism had taught her to do. The severance seemed generous at first glance, enough to cover 6 months of expenses if she was careful. But Rebecca had never been careful with money because she had never needed to be. Her salary had been steady for decades, increasing predictably with annual reviews and cost of living adjustments. She had a nice apartment, a reliable car, and a modest savings account that she had always planned to grow. Someday. Someday had arrived without warning, and she wasn't prepared. The first month after losing her job felt like an extended vacation. Rebecca updated her resume, applied to positions that seemed like natural fits, and maintained an optimistic outlook about her prospects. She had experience, references, and a strong work ethic. In her mind, it was just a matter of time before the right opportunity presented itself. She even enjoyed sleeping in and having the freedom to grocery shop during off-peak hours when the stores were quieter and the checkout lines were shorter. But the job market had changed dramatically during her 25 years of employment. The positions she was qualified for were either being automated, outsourced, or redesigned to require skills she didn't possess. Younger candidates had degrees in technologies that didn't exist when Rebecca started her career. They spoke fluently about digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and cloud-based solutions, while she struggled to understand why her Microsoft Excel expertise wasn't impressive anymore. The rejection email started politely. "We appreciate your interest in our company. While your experience is impressive, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. We encourage you to apply for future positions that might be a better fit." But as weeks turned into months, even the polite rejection stopped coming. Applications disappeared into digital voids, and phone calls went unreturned. Rebecca began to understand that she wasn't just unemployed. She was unemployable in an economy that had moved beyond her skill set. By the 4th month, panic had replaced optimism. The severance money was disappearing faster than she had calculated, eaten away by rent, utilities, car payments, and the dozens of small expenses that seem insignificant when you have a steady income, but become crushing when you don't. Rebecca started applying for positions that paid half of what she used to make, then positions that required no experience at all. She applied to work at grocery stores, retail chains, and restaurants. But even those employers seemed hesitant to hire someone who was clearly overqualified and might leave as soon as something better came along. The 6th month brought the first real crisis. Rebecca's landlord had been patient, But patience has limits when rent checks stop coming. The eviction notice wasn't a surprise, but seeing it taped to her door made the situation undeniably real. She had 30 days to find $8,000 in back rent or find somewhere else to live. Her savings account, which had once seemed adequate for emergencies, had been drained months earlier. Her credit cards were maxed out from trying to maintain her lifestyle while searching for work. Rebecca spent those 30 days making phone calls that grew more desperate with each dial tone. She called family members she hadn't spoken to in years, friends who had moved away and started new lives, and former colleagues who expressed sympathy but couldn't offer solutions. Everyone had advice about staying positive and keeping her head up, but nobody had $8,000 or a spare bedroom for a woman who had become inconvenient. The day she loaded her belongings into her 12-year-old Honda Civic was the day Rebecca Martinez stopped being the person she had always been. 25 years of professional accomplishment, of steady paychecks and performance reviews, of believing that hard work would be rewarded. All of it fit into the back seat of a car that would become her new home. She kept only what was essential: some clothes, important documents, a laptop that she hoped might still help her find work, and a cardboard sign that she never imagined she would need to use. Living in a car changes everything about how you see the world. Rebecca had driven past people experiencing homelessness thousands of times during her working years, maybe feeling a brief moment of sympathy before her mind moved on to more pressing concerns like traffic or meeting schedules. Now she understood that homelessness wasn't just about not having a roof over your head. It was about losing access to basic human dignity. Nowhere to shower, nowhere to use a bathroom privately, nowhere to simply exist without being seen as a problem that needed to be moved along. Rebecca parked her Honda in different locations each night, learning quickly which parking lots had security guards who would ask her to leave, and which ones allowed overnight stays. Walmart parking lots became sanctuaries because they were well lit, relatively safe, and the company policy generally allowed people to sleep in their cars. She learned to arrive late and leave early, to keep her car clean and avoid drawing attention to herself, and to always have a backup location in case her primary spot became unavailable. The physical discomfort was challenging, but the emotional weight was crushing. Every morning, Rebecca woke up in the backseat of her car and had to make a conscious decision to keep going. Depression wasn't something she had ever experienced before, but now it felt like a heavy blanket that made every simple task feel impossible. Getting dressed became difficult when you had to change clothes in a cramped car while trying to maintain some privacy. Staying clean became a complex logistics problem involving gym day passes, fast food restaurant bathrooms, and an elaborate system of wet wipes and dry shampoo. But the hardest part was the invisibility. Rebecca had spent her entire adult life being someone people knew and respected. She had a reputation, responsibilities, and a place in the social fabric of her community. Now she was just another person with a cardboard sign, asking for help from strangers who looked through her as if she didn't exist. The few dollars she collected each day weren't just about survival. They were about maintaining some connection to human kindness in a world that had suddenly become very cold. 3 months into her new reality, Rebecca was sitting in the parking lot of a coffee shop, using their free Wi-Fi to continue her now futile job search, when she overheard a conversation that would change everything. 2 young men at the next table were discussing something called cryptocurrency trading. But they weren't talking about it the way she had heard it discussed on the news. They weren't talking about Bitcoin as some mysterious digital concept that only tech experts could understand. They were talking about it as a tool for making real money, and they were sharing specific strategies that sounded almost like the risk management principles she had learned during her years in accounting. Rebecca had always dismissed cryptocurrency as gambling for people who didn't understand real investing. But as she listened to these 2 young traders discuss market patterns, risk ratios, and profit calculations, she realized they were using the same analytical skills she had developed over 25 years of managing financial data. The difference was that instead of helping other people build wealth, they were building it for themselves, and they were doing it with amounts of money that seemed impossible to someone who had been collecting spare change from strangers. One of the traders mentioned a specific strategy called scalping, which involved making small profits on dozens of trades throughout the day, rather than trying to hit home runs with big investments. The math was simple. If you could make a consistent 2% profit on each trade, and you could make 10 trades per day, your money would compound incredibly quickly. Even starting with just a few $100s, the numbers could grow exponentially if you had the discipline to stick to the system and reinvest your profits. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep, and for the first time in months, it wasn't because of the uncomfortable car seat or the stress of homelessness. Her mind was racing with calculations, trying to understand if what she had overheard could possibly be real. She had seen enough financial scams during her career to be naturally skeptical, but something about the conversation felt different. These weren't people trying to sell her something or convince her to join some get-rich-quick scheme. They were just two young men sharing strategies that were working for them. Rebecca spent the next week researching everything she could find about cryptocurrency trading. She used every free Wi-Fi connection she could access, from libraries to coffee shops to fast food restaurants, educating herself about blockchain technology, market analysis, and trading platforms. What she discovered was both exciting and terrifying. Cryptocurrency trading was indeed possible to learn, but it was also incredibly risky. People lost money every day by making emotional decisions, following bad advice, or failing to understand the technical aspects of what they were doing. But Rebecca had advantages that many new traders didn't possess. 25 years of working with financial data had taught her to think analytically, to manage risk carefully, and to maintain emotional discipline when making decisions that involved money. She understood the importance of having a system and sticking to it, regardless of short-term outcomes. Most importantly, she had nothing left to lose, which gave her a clarity about risk that people with comfortable lives rarely possess. The challenge was getting started. Rebecca had managed to save about $300 from her cardboard sign work, but most trading platforms required larger minimum deposits. She spent days researching different exchanges, looking for one that would allow her to start small and learn with real money, rather than just paper trading. Finally, she found a platform that would accept her $300 and provide access to the tools she needed to implement the strategies she had been studying. On a Tuesday morning in late September, Rebecca Martinez made her first cryptocurrency trade from the front seat of her Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot. She bought $50 worth of Bitcoin when the price dipped, watched the charts for 6 hours, and sold it when the price increased by 3%. After fees, she had made a profit of 87 cents. It wasn't much, but it was the first money she had made using her mind rather than asking for charity, and it felt like the most important 87 cents of her life. Rebecca's second trade lost money. Her third trade lost money. Her fourth trade made a small profit, but not enough to cover the losses from trades 2 and 3. By the end of her first week of cryptocurrency trading, she had turned her $300 into $243, and she was beginning to understand why most people who tried this path ended up broke and bitter. The difference between understanding trading strategies intellectually and executing them emotionally was vast, and Rebecca was getting an expensive education in the gap between theory and practice. But failure had a different meaning when you were already at rock bottom. Rebecca had lost jobs before, lost apartments, lost relationships, but she had never lost everything. Now that she had, the fear of loss that paralyzes most traders had been replaced by a desperate focus on learning from every mistake. Each losing trade became a lesson rather than a tragedy, and each small victory became proof that the system could work if she could just master the psychological discipline required to execute it consistently. Rebecca developed a routine that would have seemed insane to her former self, but made perfect sense in her current situation. She woke up at 4:30 every morning, when the cryptocurrency markets were most active due to Asian trading hours. She would drive to a 24-hour diner, order a cup of coffee that she could nurse for hours, and set up her laptop at a corner booth where she could monitor price charts without being disturbed. The staff initially seemed annoyed by her presence, but when they realized she was a paying customer who tipped consistently and never caused problems, they began to accept her as part of the early morning routine. The key breakthrough came during her third week of trading, when Rebecca finally understood that successful trading wasn't about being right more often than you were wrong. It was about managing risk so carefully that your winning trades always made more money than your losing trades cost you. This concept, which she had understood intellectually from her research, finally clicked emotionally when she started keeping detailed records of every decision she made and every outcome she achieved. Rebecca created a spreadsheet that tracked not just her profits and losses, but the reasons behind each trade, the emotions she was feeling when she made decisions, and the market conditions that influenced her choices. This data-driven approach to self-improvement was something she had learned during her corporate career, but applying it to trading revealed patterns she never would have noticed otherwise. She discovered that she made better decisions early in the morning when her mind was clear, that she became reckless when she was hungry, and that she was more likely to hold losing positions too long when she was emotionally invested in being right rather than being profitable. By the end of her first month, Rebecca had turned her initial $300 into $412. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented something more valuable than money, proof that her system was working. More importantly, she had developed the psychological discipline required to trade successfully, which meant she could scale up her efforts as her capital grew. The compound effect of consistent small profits was beginning to reveal its power. Rebecca's living situation remained challenging, but her relationship with homelessness was changing. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond her control, she began to see her situation as temporary and strategic. Living in her car wasn't comfortable, but it eliminated most of her expenses, which meant that every dollar she made trading could be reinvested rather than spent on rent and utilities. She was essentially living for free while building capital, which gave her an advantage that most traders didn't have. The second month brought Rebecca's first significant breakthrough. She had grown her trading account to $800 and was making trades with larger position sizes, which meant her profits and losses were more substantial. On a particularly volatile day in late October, she executed 7 successful trades in a row, each one building on the profits from the previous trade. By the end of the day, her account balance had grown from $800 to $1,400, a single-day gain that exceeded what she used to make in a week at her corporate job. But success also brought new challenges. Rebecca discovered that making money created different psychological pressures than losing money. When she was trading with her last $300, every decision was made with clear-eyed desperation. Now that she had over $1,000, she found herself becoming more conservative, more afraid of giving back her gains, which paradoxically made her less effective as a trader. She had to learn to manage success the same way she had learned to manage failure, with discipline, systems, and emotional control. Rebecca also began to understand that trading success required continuous education. The cryptocurrency markets were constantly evolving, with new technologies, new regulations, and new strategies emerging every week. She spent her afternoons in public libraries, reading everything she could find about blockchain technology, market psychology, and advanced trading techniques. She joined online forums where experienced traders shared insights and strategies, carefully filtering out the noise and focusing on advice from people who could demonstrate consistent profitability. The third month marked Rebecca's transition from survival trading to strategic trading. Her account had grown to over $2,000, and she was ready to implement more sophisticated strategies that required larger amounts of capital. She began trading currency pairs instead of just individual cryptocurrencies, which allowed her to profit from relative price movements between different digital assets. She also started using leverage carefully, borrowing money from the trading platform to increase her position sizes while maintaining strict risk management protocols. By December, Rebecca Martinez was no longer the same person who had been evicted from her apartment 6 months earlier. She was still living in her car, still carrying a cardboard sign as backup, but she was also generating more income from cryptocurrency trading than she had ever made at her corporate job. Her daily routine had evolved into a precise system. Wake up at 4:30, trade during peak hours, research and plan during the afternoon, and sleep early to maintain the mental clarity that successful trading required. Most importantly, Rebecca had discovered something about herself that 25 years of corporate employment had never revealed. She was capable of creating wealth rather than just managing it for other people. The skills she had developed during her career, combined with the psychological strength she had built during her months of homelessness, had created a unique combination of analytical ability and emotional resilience that made her exceptionally suited for cryptocurrency trading. Rebecca's breakthrough moment came on a cold January morning when she realized that her approach to cryptocurrency trading was fundamentally different from what most people were trying to do. While others were looking for the next Bitcoin or trying to time major market movements, She had accidentally developed a system that treated trading like running a small business, rather than gambling with digital lottery tickets. The method that would eventually make her wealthy wasn't based on luck or insider information. It was based on treating small, consistent profits like a manufacturing process that could be repeated and scaled. The foundation of Rebecca's system was what she called micro-scalping, a strategy that involved making dozens of small trades each day, each one designed to capture tiny price movements that most traders ignored. Instead of trying to predict whether Bitcoin would go up or down over the next week, she focused on whether it would move up or down by 1 or 2% over the next hour. These small movements happened constantly throughout the day, driven by regular buying and selling activity, rather than major news events or market manipulation. Rebecca's specific method began each morning at exactly 4:30 a.m., when she would analyze the overnight trading activity in Asian markets to identify which cryptocurrencies were showing the most consistent price patterns. She had discovered that certain digital assets moved in predictable ways during specific time periods, not because of any fundamental analysis or technical indicators, but because of the trading habits of different groups of investors around the world. Asian traders, European traders, and American traders each had different preferences and strategies, which created recurring opportunities for someone who understood these patterns. The key insight that separated Rebecca's approach from typical day trading was her understanding of volume analysis. During her corporate career, she had learned to read financial statements by looking at the relationships between different numbers rather than focusing on any single metric. She applied this same principle to cryptocurrency markets by analyzing the relationship between price movements and trading volume. When a cryptocurrency's price moved up or down on high volume, it usually meant the movement would continue. When the same price movement happened on low volume, it usually meant the movement would reverse quickly. Rebecca's daily routine became a precise execution of this analytical framework. She would identify 3 to 5 cryptocurrencies that were showing high volume price movements during Asian trading hours. Then, she would wait for these same assets to show low volume movements in the opposite direction during American trading hours, which typically happened between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Eastern Time. These counter movements created predictable opportunities to profit from short-term price corrections that most traders missed because they were looking at longer time frames. The practical implementation of this strategy required several specific tools and techniques that Rebecca had developed through months of trial and error. First, she used a combination of 3 different trading platforms simultaneously, which allowed her to compare prices and execute trades on whichever exchange offered the best opportunities at any given moment. This arbitrage element added an extra layer of profit to her basic scalping strategy, sometimes increasing her returns by 10 to 15% on individual trades. Second, Rebecca had created a custom spreadsheet that automatically calculated her position sizes based on her current account balance and the volatility of each cryptocurrency she was considering trading. This risk management system ensured that she never risked more than 2% of her total capital on any single trade, regardless of how confident she felt about the outcome. The psychological discipline required to stick to this system, especially when she was confident about a particular trade, had been one of the most difficult aspects of her method to master. Third, Rebecca had developed a network of information sources that gave her early warning about market-moving events. She monitored social media accounts of major cryptocurrency influencers, tracked regulatory announcements from government agencies, and followed technology developments from major blockchain projects. This information gathering wasn't about predicting long-term trends. It was about avoiding trades during periods when normal price patterns might be disrupted by external events. The scaling phase of Rebecca's method began in February when her trading account reached $5,000. At this point, she had proven that her system could generate consistent profits, and she was ready to increase her position sizes while maintaining the same risk management principles. Instead of making $50 trades, she began making $500 trades. Instead of making 10 trades per day, she increased to 15 trades per day. The mathematics of compound growth meant that these increases in scale produced dramatic increases in absolute profits. Rebecca's first $10,000 month happened in March, just 7 months after she had started trading with $300. But reaching this milestone also revealed new challenges that she hadn't anticipated. Trading with larger amounts of money required different strategies because her own trades were now large enough to influence the prices of smaller cryptocurrencies. She had to learn to split large positions across multiple exchanges and execute trades gradually to avoid moving markets against herself. The psychological challenges of managing larger amounts of money were equally complex. Rebecca discovered that making $5,000 in a single day created different emotional pressures than making $50 in a day. Success brought its own form of stress, including the constant fear of losing profits she had already earned and the temptation to take bigger risks in pursuit of even larger gains. She had to develop new mental discipline techniques to maintain the same analytical approach that had worked when she was trading with smaller amounts. By May, Rebecca's monthly trading profits exceeded $20,000, and she was beginning to understand that her system was not just personally successful, but potentially teachable to others. The method she had developed wasn't based on secret knowledge or special access to information. It was based on discipline, risk management, and a systematic approach to analyzing market patterns that anyone could learn with sufficient dedication and practice. The validation of Rebecca's approach came when she began documenting her trades in detail and sharing her results online. Other traders who followed her methods were able to replicate her success, which proved that her system was based on genuine market inefficiencies rather than luck or market manipulation. This social proof gave Rebecca the confidence to scale her operations even further and begin thinking about cryptocurrency trading as a legitimate business rather than just a personal survival strategy. 11 months after Rebecca Martinez had loaded her life into the back seat of a Honda Civic, she was sitting in the lobby of a luxury apartment building, waiting to sign a lease on a penthouse that cost more per month than she used to make in a year. The woman across from her at the leasing office had no idea that just months earlier, Rebecca had been asking strangers for spare change. Now she was paying 12 months of rent in advance, in cash, because her cryptocurrency trading profits had made traditional income verification irrelevant. But the apartment wasn't really about luxury or status. Rebecca had learned during her months of homelessness that material possessions weren't what created security or happiness. The apartment was about something more fundamental. It was proof that she had completely rebuilt her life using skills and strategies that no one could take away from her. Unlike her corporate job, which had disappeared due to forces beyond her control, her trading ability was something she owned completely. Market conditions might change, and individual trades might lose money, but the analytical and psychological skills she had developed would continue to generate income regardless of what happened to any single investment or economic trend. Rebecca's daily routine in her new apartment looked remarkably similar to her routine when she had been living in her car. She still woke up at 4:30 every morning, still spent her mornings analyzing cryptocurrency markets, and still maintained the same disciplined approach to risk management that had enabled her success. The difference was that now she was trading with amounts of money that made her previous corporate salary seem insignificant, and her profits were compounding at rates that made her wealth grow exponentially rather than linearly. By the end of her first year of trading, Rebecca's account balance had exceeded $1 million. But more importantly, she had developed multiple income streams that weren't dependent on her active trading. She had created an online course that taught her micro-scalping method to other aspiring traders, and the course was generating six-figure monthly revenues from people who wanted to learn her system. She had also started a cryptocurrency investment fund that allowed other people to benefit from her trading strategies without having to learn the technical details themselves. The business aspects of Rebecca's success were as important as the trading profits themselves. She had discovered that teaching her method to others not only generated additional income, but also forced her to continuously refine and improve her strategies. When students asked questions about specific market conditions or trading scenarios, Rebecca had to develop more sophisticated explanations and solutions, which made her own trading more effective. The feedback loop between teaching and learning had accelerated her professional development in ways that pure self-study never could have achieved. Rebecca's transformation wasn't just financial, it was psychological and social as well. The months of homelessness had stripped away all the external validation and social status that had defined her identity during her corporate career. She had been forced to discover who she was when nobody knew her name, when she had no title or reputation to rely on, and when her value as a person was measured purely by her ability to survive and adapt. This process had been painful, but it had also revealed strengths and capabilities that she had never known she possessed. The woman who had once defined herself as a loyal employee who followed instructions and worked within established systems had become an entrepreneur who created systems and taught others to think independently about money and investing. The transformation wasn't just about learning new skills. It was about discovering that she had always possessed the analytical intelligence and emotional resilience required for financial success, but had never been in a situation that demanded she use these abilities for her own benefit rather than someone else's. Rebecca's story had also attracted attention from media outlets and financial education companies who wanted to understand how someone had gone from homelessness to millionaire status in less than a year using only cryptocurrency trading. But Rebecca was careful about how she shared her story because she understood that her success wasn't just about the trading strategies themselves. The psychological journey from corporate employee to homeless person to successful entrepreneur had been essential to developing the mental toughness and risk tolerance required for high-level trading. The teaching aspect of Rebecca's new career brought her a different kind of satisfaction than pure profit generation. When she received emails from students who had used her methods to pay off debt, quit jobs they hated, or achieve financial independence, she felt a sense of purpose that had been missing during her corporate years. Instead of helping wealthy clients become slightly wealthier, she was helping ordinary people develop skills that could transform their economic circumstances permanently. Rebecca had also become an advocate for people experiencing homelessness, not through traditional charity work, but by demonstrating that homelessness didn't define someone's potential or value. She regularly spoke at shelters and community centers, not to offer sympathy or temporary assistance, but to teach practical skills that people could use to rebuild their lives from the ground up. Her message wasn't about cryptocurrency specifically. It was about the possibility of creating value and generating income using intelligence and determination rather than connections or credentials. The final chapter of Rebecca's transformation involved giving back to the specific locations and people who had helped her during her darkest period. She returned to the diner where she had spent countless early mornings developing her trading system, not as a customer nursing a single cup of coffee, but as someone who could afford to be generous with the staff who had allowed her to stay. She visited the libraries where she had conducted research, the coffee shops where she had used free Wi-Fi, and the parking lots where she had slept, leaving anonymous donations and thank you notes that acknowledged how much these small kindnesses had meant during her journey. Today, Rebecca Martinez lives in a world that most people would consider unimaginably different from her life 2 years ago. But in her mind, the real transformation wasn't about money or status. It was about discovering that crisis could become opportunity if you had the courage to learn new skills and the discipline to execute them consistently. Her story wasn't unique because she had found a secret strategy that nobody else could replicate. Her story was unique because she had maintained hope and continued working toward improvement even when her circumstances seemed hopeless. The cardboard sign that Rebecca had carried for months was now framed on the wall of her home office, not as a reminder of hard times, but as a symbol of the resilience and resourcefulness that had made her success possible. Next to it was a printout of her first successful trade, the 87-cent profit that had proven her system could work. These artifacts weren't decorations. They were reminders that transformation was always possible for anyone willing to learn, adapt, and persist through difficulties that would stop most people from even trying. End of the story. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories of overcoming,